The first voice I heard in the ICU was my mother's. I had not heard it in 5 years. "Sign the form, sweetheart, just so we can take care of you." A clipboard slid into my hand. I wrote 3 words in shaking capitals. "I refuse DNR." I could not see her face. I could see 2 of everything, and neither one was clear. The ceiling tiles moved when I tried to focus on them. There was a tube in my arm. There was a sound somewhere to my right that beeped at intervals I could not count. The voice came from my left. It was very close. It said my name the way she'd always said it, with a soft beat in the middle, the way nobody else in my life said it. She said, "Sign the form, sweetheart. You're going to be fine, just so we can take care of you." I thought I was dreaming her. I had dreamed her many times in 5 years. I had dreamed her at the wedding she did not come to. I had dreamed her in the kitchen of my apartment. The dreams were so familiar that for a moment I let myself believe this was another one. The clipboard pressed against my fingers. A pen was placed between my thumb and index finger. Someone was guiding my hand toward the page. A nurse to my right reached for the cuff on my arm. She was real. The cuff was real. I knew the difference between a real nurse and a dream nurse, the way you know which side of yourself is asleep. Some part of me, older and deeper than the part that was unconscious, took the pen and wrote 3 words in shaking capitals across the top of whatever the page was. "I refuse DNR." The nurse stopped moving. Her hand was still on my cuff. She was looking at the clipboard. The voice on my left went quiet. I lost consciousness again before I could see anything else. "My name is Beth. I am 31 years old. I had not seen my parents in 5 years. My husband Paul was on an oil rig 2,000 miles offshore, and his phone had been dead for 36 hours. The next time I came up, I was alone. The light in the room was different. The shadow of the window blinds had moved across the wall. I was in a different position. Someone had adjusted my pillows. The clipboard was gone. The pen was gone. I lay there for a long time and tried to remember if my mother had been there. I could not be sure. I had a vague image of her face that may have been a dream. I had her voice that may have been a memory. I had the feeling of a pen in my hand that may have been the IV line. I had the words "I refuse DNR" in my head, and I did not know if I had written them or if I had imagined writing them. I lay in that bed for 2 hours, not knowing what was real. That is the part of this story I am not sure how to explain to you. The not knowing. I am a careful person. I am married to a careful person. I edit medical journal articles for a living. I do not lose track of what is real. But I had been sedated, and I was alone, and I had a vivid impression of my mother in a room where my mother had no reason to be, and I genuinely could not tell. I cried a little, quietly, because I thought I might be losing my mind. I did not call the nurse. I did not press the call button. I lay there and tried to be sure. Around 3 in the afternoon, the door opened. A woman in a white coat came in with a man in a suit. The white coat said Patel on the embroidered name. The man in the suit had a hospital ID badge that said Hospital Risk Management. Dr. Patel sat down beside the bed. She did not stand. She sat. She said, "Beth, I'm Dr. Patel. I am your attending. We need to talk to you about something that happened this morning while you were sedated. Can you focus?" I said, "Was my mother here?" Dr. Patel paused. She looked at the man in the suit. She looked back at me. She said, "Yes, she was here. She came in at 11:47 this morning with a man who said he was your father. They tried to execute a medical power of attorney. The nurse on duty flagged it because you wrote on the clipboard. Do you remember writing on the clipboard?" I started crying. I am 31 years old, and I cried in front of my doctor and a man from risk management for 10 minutes and could not stop. It was not strategic crying. It was not the kind of crying I have done for any reason in 5 years. My body shook. The IV line shook in my arm. Dr. Patel held my left hand. She did not tell me to calm down. She did not tell me it was going to be okay. She just held my hand and waited for the storm to pass through me. When I could breathe again, the man in the suit, whose name was Jonathan, slid a piece of paper into my line of sight. He said, "Beth, this is the document they brought in. It claims to be a durable medical power of attorney signed by you in 2019. We have no record of this document on file before today. They produced it at admissions this morning. Can you tell us if you signed this?" I looked at the document. The signature on the bottom was not mine. It was close. Whoever had done it had practiced. But the loop on my B was wrong, and the way I crossed my T's was wrong, and the date in the upper corner was wrong, because I had been at a friend's wedding in another state on that exact date in 2019. I said, no, I never signed that. Jonathan said, we believe you. Dr. Patel said, Beth, I need to ask you a difficult question. Does anyone in your family work at this hospital? Anyone at all, even loosely? I said, no. I haven't talked to my family in 5 years. My parents do not know where I work. They do not have my address. How did they know I was here? Jonathan looked at his notes. He said, the admissions clerk who processed your intake this morning is a woman named Sherry. She is your mother's cousin's daughter. The first thing she did when she saw your name was call your mother. The room was very quiet. I said, oh, that was all I said. Oh. The whole shape of what had happened sat on my chest like a stone. They had not just appeared. They had been called. Within hours of my admission, while I was unconscious, my mother had been told her estranged daughter was in the ICU and she had come with a forged document and a pen. I asked Dr. Patel to check on my husband Paul one more time. I had been calling him for 36 hours. His phone was still dead. I asked her not to leave me alone. She did not leave for 40 minutes. Dr. Patel had a colleague in legal who could refer me to an estate attorney. I did not ask for one yet. I asked for a phone. I had not spoken to my Aunt Margaret in 3 years. Margaret is my father's older sister. She had been the only adult in my childhood who saw what my parents were and said it out loud. She had moved into hospice care 6 months ago. I had been waiting until I had it together to call her. I dialed the number for her old estate attorney first, the one she had used for 20 years. I did not want to bother her with anything if I could avoid it. The number was disconnected. I sat with the phone in my lap and stared at the wall for a minute. He had retired 6 months ago. I had not known. There was nobody in between Margaret and the estate but me. I called Margaret directly. She answered on the 4th ring. Her voice was thinner than I remembered. She sounded farther away. She said, "Sweetheart, you called." I said, "Aunt Margaret, hi, I'm sorry I haven't called." She said, "You have nothing to be sorry for. What is it?" I could not say it. I could not say to a dying woman that her brother had walked into a hospital that morning to put my name on a do not resuscitate order. I sat in that bed with the phone against my ear and I tried to find the words and I could not. I said, "Margaret, I'll call you back. I love you. I'll call you back tomorrow." She said, "Beth, what is it?" I said, "I love you. I'll call you back." I hung up. I cried again, more quietly this time. I cried because she was 89 and she was dying and I was about to make her last weeks worse. I cried because I had no choice. She called back 2 hours later. I do not know what those 2 hours did to her. I do not know how she had the strength to dial. The phone rang on the rolling tray beside my bed and I picked it up, and her voice on the other end was even thinner than before, but it was clear. She said, "Sweetheart, you called and then you hung up. You don't do that. Tell me what is happening." I told her. I told her the clipboard, the forged 2019 document, the admissions clerk, Dr. Patel's face when she said the name of the cousin. I told her Paul was unreachable. I told her I was alone in the ICU and my parents had walked in. She was quiet for a long time, long enough that I thought the line had gone dead. Then she said, "Give me the name of my new attorney, today." I said, "Margaret, I don't have one. Yours retired." She said, "Find me one, from your bed, with Dr. Patel's help. Today, Beth. Not tomorrow." I said, "Okay." She said, "Sweetheart, listen to me. I am very tired. I do not have a lot of clarity left. Right now, I have it. We are going to use it." Dr. Patel's colleague in legal made 3 calls in 20 minutes. By 5 o'clock that evening, I had a name. Her name was Rachel Cohen. She was 45 and she had handled estates in our state for 16 years. She agreed to take the case that night. She did not charge a retainer. Rachel pulled Margaret's existing trust documents at 6 p.m. and called me back at 7:30. She said, "Beth, I want to be careful with how I tell you this. The trust is $2.3 million. You are the named primary beneficiary. There is a cascade clause. If you predecease your aunt, the entire estate goes back to your father." I held the phone away from my ear for a moment and looked at the ceiling tile above my bed. I had not known I was the beneficiary. I had not known about the cascade. "Sign the form, sweetheart, just so we can take care of you." The line played in my head in my mother's voice. "Sweetheart." The same word she had used when I was 8 years old and she wanted me to do something. Take care of you. I almost laughed. And it would have been the wrong kind of laughter, so I did not let it out. I just held the phone and looked at the ceiling and felt the shape of the thing. I said, Rachel? She said, yes. I said, my parents knew about the cascade. She said, I think they did. I said, my aunt is dying. They were running out of time. She said, I think they were. The next morning, the hospital received a formal harassment complaint against Dr. Patel. The complaint had been filed by my mother. Karen had called the patient relations office at 8:12 a.m. and stated that her daughter's attending physician had refused to recognize her parental access rights and had emotionally manipulated her sedated daughter into signing a document. She had requested Dr. Patel be replaced. She had used the word malpractice. Patient relations called risk management before they called the doctor. Jonathan was already on it by the time Dr. Patel arrived for rounds. He met her at the elevator. He did not let the complaint touch her. Dr. Patel came into my room at 9:15. She did not tell me about the complaint until that afternoon. She said the mornings check in first, vitals, pain level, how I had slept. Then she sat down in the chair next to the bed and she told me, calmly, that my mother had tried to have her removed. I said, Dr. Patel, I am so sorry. She said, Beth, stop. You are the patient. None of this is your fault. I have a job. I am doing it. Your mother does not get to file me out of your room. She told me risk management had already escalated the complaint to the hospital's legal counsel. They had also flagged Karen and Roger's names at every entrance. Security had photos. The next attempt would not get past the lobby. The next attempt came at 1:45 that afternoon. Roger came alone this time. He came up to the ICU floor on a visitor pass that he had somehow obtained. He came to the nursing station with a folded document in his hand. He told the charge nurse he had a supplementary healthcare proxy that needed to be added to my chart. The charge nurse, who had been briefed by Jonathan, smiled at him. She said, Of course, sir. I'll take that for you. Why don't you have a seat in the waiting area while I make sure it's processed correctly? She took the document. She walked it past me, past the glass wall of my room. She made eye contact with me through the glass for a half second. Her face did not change, but her eyes told me what was happening. I watched my father from my bed through the glass. He was sitting in the waiting area. He was wearing a tan jacket I remembered from my high school years. He was reading something on his phone. He looked relaxed. He looked like a man who was waiting for paperwork to clear. I started shaking. It started in my hands and moved up my arms. I could not stop it. The IV line trembled. The blood pressure cuff on my upper arm shifted. The monitor at my right began to beep faster. A nurse came in. Her name tag said Anna. She put her hand on my shoulder. She said, Breathe, honey, breathe. He's leaving. Look, he's standing up. He's leaving. She turned my head, gently, with her hand on my chin so I could see the waiting room. Roger was being escorted to the elevator by 2 members of hospital security. He had not been told why. He was protesting calmly, like a man who believes there had been a clerical error. Anna said, Would you like a sedative? I said, No. I said, Please, no. I do not want to go under again. She said, Okay, honey. Okay. She sat on the edge of my bed for 10 minutes with her hand on my shoulder until my hand stopped shaking. She did not talk. She just sat there. I do not know her last name. I have thought about her almost every day since. The supplementary healthcare proxy in Roger's handwriting was photocopied that afternoon and added to the file Jonathan was building for the police. Hospital Risk Management referred the case to the State Police Felony Forgery Unit on Wednesday morning. A detective whose name was Bradley came to the hospital to take my statement on Wednesday afternoon. He sat in the chair Dr. Patel had used. He had a small notebook. He asked me to walk through everything from the moment I had surfaced in the ICU. I walked him through it. I told him about the clipboard, the voice, the 2-hour period of not knowing, Dr. Patel's confirmation, the disconnected attorney, Aunt Margaret's call, Roger in the waiting area. He wrote it all down. He nodded at the right places. He did not interrupt. When I finished, he said, Beth, I want to be honest with you about what comes next. Forgery cases like this take time. Your parents are not in custody yet. They will not be in custody for a few days. We have to interview them first. We have to get the document examiner's report. Your mother has already retained counsel. She refused the first interview attempt this morning. Her attorney did all the talking. I said, How long? He said, I do not know. A week, maybe 2. The case is solid. The evidence is good. We will get there. I just need you to know it is not happening tonight. I said, okay. He said, in the meantime, the hospital is keeping you safe. They are doing everything right. You are safe. He left at 4 p.m. Paul came back at 6. His phone had reconnected somewhere over the Gulf, and he had received 42 messages from me, 6 from Dr. Patel and 4 from a hospital social worker. He had been on a helicopter to shore within an hour. He had driven from the heliport in clothes he had not changed in 4 days. He walked into my room and he stopped at the foot of the bed. He did not speak for 90 seconds. I want you to understand what that 90 seconds was. It was not a strategic pause. It was not him gathering himself. It was a man who had almost lost his wife while he was unreachable on a piece of metal in the middle of an ocean, and who had just walked into a room where she was alive and could not yet form the sentence that contained that fact. He stood at the foot of the bed and he did not move. His hands were at his sides. He was looking at me. He was looking at the IV line. He was looking at the bandage on my forehead. He was looking at the bruise on my collarbone where the seatbelt had locked. He was looking at my face. He came around the side of the bed at the 90-second mark, and he picked up my left hand and he held it against his cheek. He did not kiss it, he just held it there. He closed his eyes. He said, I am so sorry. I said, you don't have to. He said, I am so sorry. He sat in that chair for the next 11 hours. He did not eat. He did not sleep. The nurses brought him water. He drank some of it. He held my hand. Sometime around midnight, he opened the bag he had brought with him. He had brought our real durable medical power of attorney, the actual one, signed in 2024, signed in our attorney's office in front of a notary and 2 witnesses. He had brought a copy of the trust paperwork. He had brought the file folder we kept in the safe at home that contained everything anyone would ever need to identify me as me. He gave it all to Jonathan the next morning. The document examiner compared the 2019 forgery with the 2024 real one and with a state notary template from 2019. The forgery had a witness attestation clause that did not exist in any state template until 2022. Whoever had drafted the forgery had used a current online template and backdated it. The clause was 3 years too modern for the date on the page. The detective called me that evening. He said, the document examiner's report is in. The forgery is confirmed. We are moving forward. Aunt Margaret asked her new attorney, Rachel, to come to the hospice on Friday morning. Rachel drove 4 hours. She brought the amended trust documents in a leather portfolio. She brought a notary. She brought 2 witnesses from the hospice staff who had worked with Margaret long enough to know her by name. Margaret had not eaten in 2 days. She was on oxygen. Her hands were thin enough that the wedding ring she had worn for 61 years had been moved to her index finger to keep it from slipping off. She was sitting up in bed when Rachel arrived. She had asked the hospice nurse to brush her hair. She wore a blue cardigan over her hospital gown. She had picked the cardigan herself. I was on speakerphone from my hospital bed. Paul was beside me. He held the phone. I held his other hand. Rachel walked Margaret through the amendment. The cascade back to Roger was severed. If I predeceased Margaret, the trust would no longer revert to my father. It would default to the Children's Hospice Foundation that had cared for Margaret's husband when he died 18 years ago. The same foundation she had volunteered for every Wednesday for 14 years before her own diagnosis. Margaret listened. She nodded once. Rachel asked her if she understood. Margaret said yes. Rachel asked her if she was signing freely and without coercion. Margaret said yes. Margaret signed the amendment with the pen Rachel had brought. Then she asked for the speakerphone closer to her face. She said, Beth, are you there? I said, I'm here. She said, sweetheart, listen to me carefully. The money does not go back to Roger. Ever. Whatever happens to me, whatever happens to you, your father does not get $1. I have been waiting 40 years to put that in writing. I have done it. It is done. I cried. She said, do not cry, sweetheart. This is a good day. I said, I love you, Aunt Margaret. She said, I love you too. Take care of Paul. He has a kind face. I always thought so. The call ended at 11 a.m. Margaret passed at 4:27 a.m. 11 days later. I was discharged from the hospital 2 days before she died. I went to see her once at the hospice. She was not conscious during my visit. I held her hand for 40 minutes. I told her about the foundation paperwork. I told her about Paul. I told her I was going to be okay. I do not know if she heard. The hospice nurse, whose name was Helen, told me later that Margaret had smiled in her sleep an hour after I left. Helen may have told me that to be kind. I will never know. I have decided to believe her. The memorial was held on a Saturday in a small church Margaret had chosen herself. I sat in the front pew with Paul. 43 people came. Roger was not there. Karen was not there. Neither of them had been told about the death. Rachel had handled that. I gave the eulogy. I do not remember most of what I said. I remember saying that my aunt had been the only adult in my childhood who told me the truth, and that I had spent my life trying to be the kind of person she had seen in me when I was 9 years old. I remember saying, "The money does not go back to Roger. Ever." I said it because it was the last thing she had said to me, and because I wanted everyone in the church to hear it, and because somewhere on a Friday morning 2 weeks earlier, she had used the very last of her clarity to make sure of it. The detective called me 3 days after Margaret's memorial. He said, "Beth, we have the phone records, both phones, your mother's and your father's. We have text messages between them dating back to the day you were admitted. We have a search history on your father's phone from the morning of your admission for the phrase, 'How to get a power of attorney executed quickly.' We have your mother's text from 11:02 a.m. that morning. The text says, 'Sherry called. Beth is in the ICU. She is unconscious. We have an opening.'" He paused. He said, "The case is going to charges." I said, "When?" He said, "We are coordinating with hospital security for your mother. She has been calling the hospital again, trying to get visitor access. She does not know we have the phones. She thinks she is fine. The plan is to let her come in next time she calls and ask for visitor access. We will let her come up. Security will stop her at the ICU corridor entrance. I will be there. I will read her rights." I said, "Why there?" He said, "2 reasons. First, the documentation. We have hospital security camera coverage on that corridor. The arrest will be on video. Second, your mother thinks she still has access to that floor. She thinks she can still walk in. I want her to walk in believing it. I want the moment she stops believing it to be on camera." I said, "When?" He said, "I do not know exactly. We are waiting on her to call. Could be tomorrow, could be next week." I said, "Will you tell me when it happens?" He said, "I will call you the minute it is done. You do not have to be there. You should not be there. Your mother's lawyer will use anything she can find. You stay home. Paul stays with you. I call you when it is done." I said, "Okay." I was at home with Paul on a Thursday afternoon when the call came. We were in the kitchen. He was making soup. The phone rang on the counter and I picked it up and the detective said, "It is done. She is in custody. Your father will be in custody by tonight." I sat down on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinets. Paul knelt next to me. He did not ask. He waited. I said, "They got her." He sat down next to me on the kitchen floor and he held me, and I cried for the second time in front of someone since the day I had surfaced in the ICU, and Paul did not say a single word the entire time. Karen had called the hospital that morning asking about visitor access for her daughter Beth, who had been admitted to the ICU and whom she had not been allowed to see. The patient relations operator transferred her to a number that Bradley had provided. The number on the other end was the detective's, but the voice was a hospital staffer who told Karen she could come up at 3 p.m. Karen drove 90 minutes. She arrived at the hospital at 2:48. The detective read Karen her rights on the ICU corridor. Her purse hit the tile. 3 nurses stood at the station. Nobody moved. Anna, the nurse who had sat on the edge of my bed for 10 minutes the day Roger came with the second document, was one of the 3. She told me later she had not been on duty. She had heard from a friend on the floor that the arrest was scheduled. She had come in on her day off to watch. Roger was taken from his home at 6:15 that evening. He opened the door in a tan jacket. 2 officers escorted him to the car. A neighbor across the street watched from her porch. The neighbor had known my parents for 30 years. She did not wave. Charges were filed the following Monday. Felony document forgery. Attempted medical fraud. The lesser included offense of attempted aggravated manslaughter on the theory that a forged DNR executed on an unconscious ICU patient was an act intended to prevent life-saving treatment. The prosecutor told Rachel privately that the manslaughter charge was unusual and would be hard to win, but that he wanted it on the record. The trial took 11 months to come to court. I testified on a Tuesday morning. I wore a navy blue suit. Paul sat in the second row behind the prosecutor. Rachel sat behind him. The prosecutor walked me through my testimony for 90 minutes. I was steady. I had practiced. I told the jury about the voice. I told them about the clipboard. I told them about the 2 hours of not knowing. The clipboard was entered as Exhibit 14. The prosecutor projected it on the screen above the jury box. "I refuse DNR," in shaking capitals. The handwriting of a woman who was, at that moment, not sure she would live. The jury looked at the screen for a long time. The foreperson, a woman in her 60s with a gray bob, took her glasses off and put them back on. One of the alternates closed his eyes for a second. The prosecutor played the audio from the hospital security camera in the ICU room. He had not had video. He had only had audio. The audio was clear. My mother's voice came through the courtroom speakers. "Sign the form, sweetheart. You're going to be fine, just so we can take care of you." She had said it 3 times in the audio. 3. I had not remembered 3. I had remembered 1. The third time her voice was harder. The third time it was less the voice of a mother and more the voice of a woman running out of time. The jury heard all 3. Karen was convicted on all counts except the manslaughter, which the judge dismissed on directed verdict. She received 4 years. Roger received 3. They were sentenced separately. I attended both sentencings. I sat in the back. Karen did not look at me. Roger did. He held my eyes for a full second before the bailiff turned him toward the door. I do not know what was in his face. I have stopped trying to know. The $2.3 million went to the Margaret Williams wing of the Children's Hospice. The wing opened 14 months after Margaret's death. There is a small bronze plaque by the entrance. It says her name, the years of her life, and one sentence she had asked Rachel to put on it before she died. The sentence is, "The money does not go back." Paul and I went to her grave on the 1st anniversary. I sat on the grass. Paul sat next to me. I talked to the stone for a while. I told her about the foundation. I told her about the wing. I told her about the trial. I told her the courtroom had heard her brother in handcuffs. I told her about the nurse Anna, who would come in on her day off to watch the arrest. I told her I had a baby on the way, 8 weeks, very early, and we had not told anyone yet. I told her I was going to name the baby Margaret if it was a girl. Paul put his hand on my back. We sat there for an hour. If you have ever been told for years that the people who hurt you only meant well, and you went a long time believing them, and you finally found one room in your life where someone told you the truth and meant it, I want you to know that room counts. One adult who saw you when you were 9. One nurse who sat on the edge of your bed. One aunt who used the last of her clarity to put it in writing. One husband who came home from a piece of metal in the middle of an ocean and held your hand against his cheek for 90 seconds before he could speak. The rooms count. They are how you survive the other rooms. Subscribe if you want company while you find yours. Stay if you already have. Tell them, while you can, that you remember the door they opened.